Hi, this is Sarah McFarland. I'm the editorial director of Threads Magazine, and we are putting together a special bonus episode of our podcast, Sewing with Threads. And I'm on today remotely with Erica. Want to introduce yourself and your role?
I'm Erica Redfern. I'm an assistant editor at Threads.
And with Carol.
Hi, I'm Carol Frasia. I'm the senior technical editor for Threads.
And we're going to talk about sewing and kind of try and take our mind off things. And I miss you guys. Usually we're in the office together working on the next magazine or videos or, different projects. And one thing I want to mention before we start is that our podcast sponsor is Baby Lock, and we're extending their sponsorship to our bonus episodes. And I want to tell you about a special program. It's called Sewing This Together. And Baby Lock has introduced the program, and it's designed to help people make it through the day through a shared love of sewing. As part of the program, Baby Lock is offering 60 days free of its Sew Ed online classes for sewists across the United States and Canada. The classes cover topics including sewing basics, new techniques, and projects of all kinds. You can connect to these free classes through any internet-connected device. In addition, Baby Lock is encouraging sewists to make and donate homemade face masks. The mask can be made from a thick, breathable cotton found in a variety of materials around the house, like t-shirts, dish towels, and pillowcases. There's a step-by-step video available. The video, along with the instructions and a pattern, can be found on the Baby Lock blog. And that page will also include access to a list of organizations in need of masks. We'll have a direct link to that page in the show notes for this episode at threadsmagazine.com. Information about Sewing This Together and to sign up for Baby Lock's free Sew Ed online video classes, you can visit babylock.com/60 days free. So I thought that was a really wonderful program for Baby Lock to offer. And of course, we're grateful to them for being a sponsor for the regular Sewing with Threads podcast. Now, today, Carol and I had talked in advance. When we first started working from home, I put up an Instagram post about facing of facing. And that's a technique where you can use your Fusible interfacing to face the facings that you're making. And Carol, could you explain it? You're really good at explaining it.
Oh, thanks a lot. In this technique, what you do is you, instead of just fusing the interfacing as you normally would to the wrong side of the facing, you fuse it to the facing with the fabric's right sides together. You don't fuse it, you sew it with right sides together and then flip it to the wrong side and fuse it. We're going to describe it a little bit more in detail, but what this does is provide you with a sewn edge along the outer edge of the facing, the free edge that will be inside your garment, so that there's a seam instead of having to be serged or zigzagged or turned under and stitched. And it's a very clean finish, and then the fusible interfacing will be on the wrong side of the facing, fused in place. So everything is very neat and tidy. And this is a method that's actually really nice for a garment that will not be lined and where you may see the inside because it provides quite a clean edge.
It sounds like a really nice way to finish.
I was going to say, Erica, I'm going to call you out as sort of the newer sewer.
Guilty.
And have you ever tried this technique?
I have not. I actually hadn't heard of it. Carol and I talked about it briefly, I think a couple of weeks ago, talking about one of the garments from Pattern Review in 209. And it seems like it's a really convenient way to finish things. I'm actually working on a top right now that has a face neckline. It's a knit, so I don't think it'll work for this because I think it would be too much bulk. But I wonder, what sort of seam allowance would you do? Like, how wide should the seam allowance be? And would you trim it away before you fold and fuse? Because I would worry about it being bulky along that edge.
That's a very good question. And the whole reason I wanted to talk about this is I think that there are a lot of nice refinements that you can make to this technique. And that was a question that came up. So for the seam allowance, I usually use a pretty narrow seam allowance, a 1/4 inch or 3/8 of an inch. I don't typically trim it. How about you, Carol?
It would depend, but I tend to use a very narrow seam allowance to 1/4 inch, probably maximum. But I could actually see a benefit in using maybe a 3/8 inch seam allowance and then pinking along that edge, pink it kind of close to that seam line so that when you turn the interfacing back to the wrong side of the facing, you don't have to clip anything or notch anything, and it may turn under kind of neatly. It's worth checking how this feels with the fabric that you're using, though. If you're just using a thin fabric like a shirting weight, you can probably just trim it down to 1/4 inch and turn it under pretty easily, or even closer than that. This is not a seam that's going to take any real stress, so you can trim it very, very closely if you want to.
Now, ideally, to get a really nice edge on the facing, you should press that interfacing facing seam open before you flip it. But how are you going to deal with a hot iron and fusible interfacing? And I had some tips for how I deal with that, and I think that they're pretty good, and I wasn't able to get into them on Instagram. Freezer paper and put the wax side up on my ironing board, and then I use a dry iron and just very carefully press that seam open down so the fusible interfacing glue is against the freezer paper, and I try to touch it as little as possible, but if I get a little bit of stickage, it will usually just pull right off that freezer paper.
That is very ambitious of you.
Is there any... It's very painstaking. I like to take the painstaking route a lot of times. But someone asked about understitching that seam. And then Carol and I got into a talk about understitching and when to do it.
Yeah, you could understitch the seam allowances to the interfacing side, and then when you flip it over, it should roll, to the underside of the facing so that seam line is a little bit favored under, and then press it there. That might keep you from having to press it. I don't think I've done that, but I haven't been. Well, maybe I did do that. I should check. I know that I used this technique on a jacket that I made from a Fred Blaybaum La Fred pattern years ago when I came to interview at Threads, and I made myself a skirt and a jacket to wear to my interview. And I thought all the bells and whistles would go into this jacket. It wasn't lined because I only had like 4 days to make this outfit. But I thought I will finish these facings really nicely. So I did it on that one. That's when I first tried using this.
Carol, I have a question. That brings to mind a question. I have a question to ask you about when you came to Threads. Did they ask you in advance to bring things that you had sewn?
They did. They asked me to bring just some sort of representative items that I had sewn. And that was kind of tough business for me because I was coming off of 6 months nearly a year of maternity leave. I must have been on maternity leave or off with my kids, or I'd taken a break or something for a long time, and all I'd been sewing was, I'd been making things for my kids and stuff to wear around the house, and I hadn't really made anything that was particularly interesting for a bit. And so I had to dig around and find some old stuff, which I was at that point not that proud of, because in the year when I was home, I was doing much sort of more interesting sewing. It just didn't seem like stuff they would want. But I did bring out a couple things. I had made some sort of complicated dress, sort of a cocktail dress from a Berta magazine, and I brought that, and I had used some of those artsy sort of independent patterns that they used to have back in those days. There's not as many of them now. Maybe I also had a sewing workshop or some kind of pattern like that was interesting, and it turned out to be very much the Threads aesthetic, and they liked them, so that worked out okay.
Yeah, well, you were both ahead of me when I interviewed. I had only been sewing for, I think, about a month and a half when I started, so I came in with a circle skirt that I'd made and a little zippered pouch, and I was quite proud of that. But I picked up more skills very quickly.
I was going to say, we could tell that you were going to pick things up.
Yeah, I brought some of my knitted things. I had a knitted angler fish that I brought in and a couple of cowls, I think, just to show that I could do things.
Well, you obviously had an aptitude for it. That was what we wanted to see.
Yeah, I was very proud of the zipper on that pouch. It was my first zipper I ever put in, and it was just like nice and straight. And I was like, finished that, I think, just the day before, maybe even the morning of my interview. I was also scrambling.
Yeah, there's kind of a history of that with us.
Well, I think that isn't there sort of a concept that, you make something, you wear it, then you take it home and finish it? Isn't that kind of how a home sewer does things? You get it together just enough to wear it where it has to go, and then you can go home and make it better.
That's true. Whenever I have a deadline that I need to wear something that I am making, there are usually a few interior details that need to be finished later.
Yeah, I have a skirt that I made that at the time I didn't have any hooks and eyes for the waistband, so I burglared a set from an old bra that no longer fit. And they're skin colored. They don't match the black fabric at all. They're still in there. I haven't bothered to change them yet, but I will eventually.
You could just go through with the black Sharpie and color them.
I suppose so. Feels a little bit like cheating.
Are there any substitutions that you're making right now because you're not getting out and getting new notions? I've been much more lenient with thread color, with some of my closure colors.
Yeah, I've the top that I'm working on, it's a sort of dusty denim color. It's a knit, and all I have is a navy thread. It actually doesn't look bad on it. I would probably want a slightly lighter thread in an ideal circumstance where I could go out and go shopping, but I don't dislike it, and it's probably better this way anyway, so I don't have 8 billion spools of thread lying around.
Well, you guys know that I just recorded a video about just keeping a whole bunch of neutral colored threads in your sewing room. So in order to do that video, I had put all of my basic grays and things like that into a Ziploc baggie. And then I brought them home when we were told to come home, and I put them somewhere. And so when I was down in my sewing room trying to sew, I thought I need my neutral thread, but I couldn't immediately lay my hands on it. So I actually matched the thread on one side of something, and the bobbin was like some kind of gray. And I actually have been using neutral thread throughout some of the sewing I've been doing recently. I made a lot of, I made like 9 or 10 cloth face masks over the weekend.
Oh, good.
And in
for
order
you,
not
Carol.
to have to change thread the whole time, I just used sort of a medium gray. And that worked out fine. And also I had a huge spool of twill tape to make ties. That was lucky. I just happened to have that.
Carol, have you found anything for the bendable portion to fit over the nose?
You know, I had some, I think they're now called chenille stems because pipe cleaner isn't in fashion anymore, but I did have some pipe cleaners in the house. I didn't actually end up using them, though, because I couldn't figure out a good way. Well, I partly because I didn't know if people would want to have those, and the style I was making didn't necessarily require it as much, but I would probably try that again in the future. I had thought about putting maybe like an external casing, like a narrow one made of bias trim just over the nose so that the pipe cleaner could be slipped in and then taken out if you wanted to wash it, and it wouldn't get all, smushed up in the wash or rusty or the ends poke out or something. That might be the next round.
That's a good idea. I hadn't thought about the washing. I thought I had twist ties, but it turns out I have 2 twist ties. So,
But they're not supposed to be too good anyway because they're too sharp at the ends, I think.
Yeah, I looked into trying to make some masks, but I don't have the right notions. I don't have any elastic for the straps. I don't have any twill tape. I have plenty of quilting cotton, but I suppose I could make them with ties. It just seems slightly less convenient for people instead of just, looping their ears.
Well, the ties are good. They're better for adjusting, I've found. Having tried these on 3 different faces in my house, we all have our own. Nobody gets to wear anybody else's because we're being careful about that. But, I've been making different sizes and having everybody try them. And the elastic is nice, but it actually is tough. It kind of ruins your hairdo if you care about your hairdo. The ties seem to work out okay. I would advise that, except I know that if you don't have any kind of tape or anything like ribbon right now, it's really tedious and time consuming to actually sew the ties. That's like a long process and makes the whole, you can make these things in 15 minutes, but if you have to spend 20 minutes making ties, then it feels a little bit thankless.
Carol, how do you pre-treat the fabric that you make into masks?
I have not been pre-treating. I've been using like a print fabric for the outer layer, and I have some muslin that I've been using, and I actually had some solid colored cotton for the inside that I've been using on some. And I'm assuming that people have to wash these things as soon as they get them before they wear them anyway. So I've just sent a package off to my parents' house and said, just throw them all in the wash first and then dry them and then they'll be okay to be used. They'll shrink a bit, but I think they'll still be okay. They seem generously sized enough that I think they'll be all right. And I guess I should give a shout out to Robert Kaufman, who generously sends us really wonderful fabric samples.
You have I'm not sure what the books.
You know, I did. Well, when they were put on the free giveaway counter after the seasons had ended for those prints, I have been taking them home thinking I would make something kind of cool out of them, and I'm ending up making masks out of them, and they seem to be pretty popular. I've made a nice selection of tropical theme Hawaiian shirt masks.
Nice and cheerful.
Yeah.
A little bit of brightness.
And the fabric is a really nice quality. It's I think going to be comfortable to wear.
You know, I should mention they said they were going to have some more in stock too, but the elastic. So letsew.com got in touch with us, and I put this in our forums too, where people are talking about masks, and they have face mask elastic, and they're expecting to get more in stock too.
Okay.
And
I'll have to check
is it very narrow, like 1/8 inch?
I actually have not been on the site to check it yet, but I know that Becca, our social media specialist, she said that she was able to order some. And the people at Let's Sew made a point of noting that they are not upcharging because they really want to help people make face masks. Yeah, I thought it was nice of them to mention. So and they did expect to get more in stock too. So I think by the time people hear this, they may be able to go there and still get elastic.
As long as it's not a mad rush.
I was thinking about making some for my parents too. I might have some elastic, or I was going to make ties. Carol, I was thinking about, were you thinking that the ties were really tedious because of turning them?
Well, either that or folding them flat. I mean, I suppose if you have a bias tape maker, you could just, fold yourself some bias tape, fold it in half and just sew down it. Cut strips and press that. Just otherwise, I think it is kind of annoying to have to do all that folding and cutting and all that. Yeah. But I like the twill tape because I think I hope it will be okay. It seems to be what's used on, when you get like a hospital Johnny kind of a gown or something. It seems like that, what I'm using. And I know that these masks will probably have to be dried in a hot dryer. And I thought it might hold up better than plastic, which can get kind of destroyed over drying time. But
yes.
let's be optimistic and say possibly we won't have to wash and dry these for more than a couple of months. And so that elastic should last that long.
Yes, I hope so. And I had one more mask related question. Carol, did you make masks with pockets in them?
I did not, because I don't know of anybody who has access to an N95 filter or any other type of filter. So I've just made them. These are really meant for, if my loved ones need to go out to the post office, which my husband has done for me recently to ship a few things to our seamstress, Norma. He took out a package yesterday. I would like them to be wearing these masks just in case. But I mean, I know that people are standing quite far apart from each other now. So that's good. But the masks are more and more getting recommended just for kind of going about your daily business out in the world.
Yes, I've been thinking about how I would like one for other people's comfort too.
Right.
I went to the grocery store and I followed all the guidelines. This was just yesterday. I went as early as possible and it was quite packed. And, I wasn't sick. I'm not coughing or anything, but I thought I did see some people in masks and I thought I bet it would make other people more comfortable as well as some to wear.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I feel like that's, a big part of this is that we're sort of showing our solidarity with not passing anything we may or may not have around.
Yeah, with everything going on, it's just nice for people to be able to feel a little bit more safe when they go out.
Well, it was really good to talk to you both. I know for this episode, we don't have video, but for our upcoming episodes, we plan on doing one a week, and we're looking into having video so that our audience will be able to see us. And just everybody stay safe and be healthy.
You can visit us on our forums if you'd like on our website at threadsmagazine.com. We'd love to hear from you and what you're experiencing, how you're staying creative and productive while you're at home.
Yes, and we have at least 2 threads on the forum that are related specifically to making masks. Good to talk to you both.
It's good to talk to you
guys.
Too. Bye.
Thank you for listening. Follow Threads on social media and visit threadsmagazine.com to view show notes for this episode. While you're on the site, check out Threads Insider, our online membership with exclusive access to expert sewing techniques. Until next time, keep on sewing with Threads.